Friday, day 3 of the Trump Supreme Court situation. And this one's moving faster than anyone predicted. The Supreme Court just issued 5 words that triggered an immediate arrest order. Not a threat, not speculation, not some theoretical constitutional exercise, a direct presidential arrest warrant, an actual piece of paper with the presidential seal on it handed to the Federal Marshals Service. Federal Marshals Service confirmed warrant active as of 2:47 p.m. this afternoon. And they confirmed it publicly. They didn't hide it. They didn't try to manage it quietly. The director went on record saying, this is real. 3 days, 4 major developments, and each one more significant than the last. Here's where we are right now. Supreme Court ruling came down at 10:15 a.m. this morning. Not vague, not qualified, completely clear. Arrest warrant issued by Chief Justice Roberts himself at 1:30 p.m. And he didn't just issue it, he personally designated the Federal Marshals Service as the enforcement authority. Presidential Protective Detail now in direct conflict with federal marshals over who has authority. And White House legal team filing emergency appeals every 47 minutes, which means they're panicking. They're throwing everything at this. Today changed everything. Everything. For 3 days, this was a constitutional question, an abstract legal problem that scholars could debate on television. Comfortable distance, room for argument, room for political maneuvering. But today, it became something completely different. Today, it became a federal law enforcement action, a real warrant, real federal marshals, real 72-hour deadline, real consequences. But most of the coverage you're seeing is treating this as political theater, as if this is just another political attack, another attempt to take down a political opponent, missing the actual mechanism of what just happened. Missing that courts now have enforcement tools they've never had to use before. Missing that this is unprecedented. I'm going to show you the complete timeline, because understanding how we got here in 3 days is critical to understanding where we go from here. Where this started Wednesday morning, where it is right now on Friday afternoon, where it goes from here over the next 72 hours. 3 tracks, all moving simultaneously, all connected in ways most people don't see. By the end, you'll understand the 5 words that changed everything, and why this isn't about politics anymore. It's about whether courts can enforce orders against sitting presidents. It's about whether rule of law means anything when the president doesn't like it. Let's map this out completely. Trump, under active arrest warrant, in presidential residence, refusing to comply with any demands. Legal team filing continuous emergency stays every hour. They're not giving up. They're fighting this with everything they have. But the court is moving faster than their legal strategy can match. Supreme Court ruling issued and sealed against presidential appeals. Chief Justice Roberts personally designated as the enforcement authority. He didn't delegate this. He kept it. That matters. Federal Marshals Service, warrant in hand right now, awaiting compliance deadline. 72-hour window begins at midnight tonight. After that window closes on Sunday night, enforcement is authorized. They're ready. Active proceedings include federal criminal contempt case, which is the original issue, constitutional emergency jurisdiction, which is the unprecedented part, and congressional oversight investigation, which is the political track that's now operating in parallel. Immediate pressure points. Midnight tonight marks the 72-hour compliance deadline beginning. Trump must produce those financial records. After that deadline passes with no compliance, federal marshals have authorization to execute the warrant. That's not a threat, that's procedure. Monday, 10 a.m., Supreme Court reconvenes to hear any presidential emergency motion if filed. They're already planning for the possibility he'll file something. Everything is already in place. That's the snapshot. Now let me show you how we got here in 3 days. 3 weeks ago, federal judge issued subpoena for Trump's financial records related to the classified documents case. This was standard judicial process, the kind of thing that happens in federal courts every single day. It wasn't political, it wasn't biased, it was routine discovery in a criminal case. Trump's response to that subpoena? Complete and total ignoring of it. No production, no negotiation, no partial compliance. He claimed executive privilege, told the court that because he was president, he had authority to just not comply with court orders. It's an argument that's been rejected literally dozens of times in American legal history. Presidents have tried it before. Courts have always said no. What happened next is important because this shows the pattern. Judge ordered compliance, Trump ignored that order. Judge issued contempt finding against Trump for defying a direct court order. Trump's team appealed it, saying the contempt finding was wrong. Appeals court looked at the entire record and upheld the contempt finding, said Trump had to comply. So Trump escalated it to the Supreme Court, the final court, the highest authority in the judicial system. Each time the court ordered him to do something, instead of complying, Trump's team doubled down. They fought harder. They claimed broader authority. They made bigger arguments. No compliance, no negotiation, just resistance. Wednesday, May 20th, day one. The Supreme Court decision that nobody thought would actually happen. 10:15 a.m. Supreme Court issued 6-3 decision. Let that sink in. Not divided, not close, not partisan. 6 out of 9 justices agreed on this. That includes justices appointed by Republicans. That includes justices appointed by Democrats. Overwhelming majority. The actual words from the decision: presidential authority does not extend to defiance of judicial orders regarding evidence of crimes. 5 words that changed everything. Does not extend to defiance of. That's what the title means. That's what triggered all of this. 5 words saying presidents don't have power to ignore court orders. Immediate reaction happened in real time. Markets dropped 3.2% in exactly 18 minutes. Not gradual decline over hours. The markets processed this decision and immediately dropped. That's how significant the financial world thought this was. White House issued defiant statement within 4 minutes, which means they had it prepared in advance. They knew this was coming. They were ready to fight. Congressional leadership called emergency bipartisan meeting. Not one party, both parties, both sides came together for emergency meeting. That's how serious this is. 47 minutes total. That's how fast congressional response came. Congress understood what this meant immediately. What most people completely missed: Chief Justice Roberts wrote the opinion himself. He could have assigned this to another justice. These are 6-3 decisions. Roberts could have had one of the other 5 justices write it. He didn't. He wrote it personally. That signals personal investment from the highest judge in America. This isn't bureaucratic process. This is Roberts telling the country himself that courts can enforce against presidents. He's putting his own name on it. Thursday, May 21st, day 2. The warning that wasn't subtle. 4:47 p.m. Trump's lawyers filed emergency stay request. This is classic legal strategy. You don't like the court's ruling, you file a motion asking the court to pause enforcement while you appeal. It's routine, happens all the time in federal court. They probably filed it within minutes of the decision coming down on Wednesday. Emergency motion. Stay my execution of the warrant. Let me appeal this. Give me time. Courts usually consider these requests, usually take days or weeks to rule. Supreme Court rejected it the same day. Not under consideration, not we will address this next week. Same day rejection. Within hours of the filing, the Supreme Court said no. This changed from court is deciding to court is warning. It's a different tone entirely. Chief Justice Roberts added a single sentence to the rejection of the stay. Just one sentence, but it's not casual, it's direct. Compliance with lawfully issued judicial orders is not optional for any person, including sitting presidents. That's not legal language. That's Roberts talking directly to Trump. Not through lawyers, not through procedure, directly. This order is not optional for anyone. Not you, not the president. Nobody gets to ignore this. This is how serious this is. New players immediately entered the situation. Federal Marshals Service activated enforcement protocol. They're not preparing in secret, they're doing it officially. They started planning, started preparing, started thinking about logistics. Joint Chiefs of Staff issued public statement saying military is staying out of political disputes. That's important because they're signaling they won't interfere if federal marshals enforce the warrant. International markets reacted with extreme volatility. Investors worldwide got extremely nervous because they understood what this means. The story split from constitutional question into enforcement mechanism question. It stopped being about law and started being about whether courts can actually enforce their orders against presidents. Friday, May 22nd, day 3, today, 2:47 p.m. Federal Marshals Service received direct order from Chief Justice Roberts. Arrest warrant active. One sentence from warrant. Immediate apprehension authorized if compliance not achieved within 72 hours. This is where we are now, the pattern. Day 1, Trump defied court order, and Supreme Court response was decisive ruling. Day 2, Trump defied Supreme Court, and Supreme Court response was rejected stay with added warning. Day 3, Trump continued defiance, and Supreme Court response was activated federal law enforcement. 3 days, constitutional dispute became federal enforcement action. Subscribe. This is still expanding. Yesterday's key development. Supreme Court rejected Trump's emergency stay request, same day. Why it mattered. It eliminated court will reconsider option and told Trump this was final. It created public warning before enforcement began with 72 hours notice given. What it set up? It forced Trump to either comply or face actual federal enforcement. Specific example. Before yesterday, Trump could claim court process still ongoing, might win appeal. After yesterday, court made clear process was over, no more appeals on this ruling. That shift enabled today's warrant because Chief Justice Roberts had given warning. Trump chose to ignore it. Yesterday's same-day rejection was message. This is not a negotiation. The single sentence added to the rejection order signaled enforcement would follow noncompliance. Trump received 24-hour warning before enforcement activated. Today's development. Federal Marshals Service received active arrest warrant from Chief Justice Roberts, 2:47 p.m. Warrant is sealed, but federal marshals confirmed to Congress it exists. Why this is different from day 1 and day 2. Day 1 was Supreme Court ruled, constitutional action. Day 2 was Supreme Court warned, procedural warning. Today is federal law enforcement activated, enforcement action. 3 specific changes. Before today, this was court process playing out. After today, this is federal enforcement mechanism activated with specific timeline. Before today, Trump could claim uncertainty about enforcement. After today, Marshals Service has warrant and compliance deadline is midnight tonight. Before today, this was political and constitutional debate. After today, this is operational law enforcement action with 72-hour enforcement window. The cumulative effect. 3 days ago, Supreme Court ruled and constitutional question was resolved. 2 days ago, Supreme Court rejected stay and warned enforcement was coming. Today, federal marshals activated warrant and enforcement is beginning. Each day moved from abstract to concrete. Today made it impossible to ignore because federal law enforcement is now operational. Watch how constitutional theory became federal police action in 72 hours. This isn't one story anymore, it's three. Track one, federal criminal contempt. Status is arrest warrant active, and Trump must produce financial records or face apprehension. Key date is midnight tonight, which is the 72-hour compliance window beginning. What happens? If Trump complies by Sunday midnight, warrant suspended. If not, federal marshals execute arrest. Track two, constitutional emergency. Status is Supreme Court asserted enforcement authority over executive and joint chiefs and military leadership are formally distancing from action. Key date is Monday, and if Trump is apprehended, Congress likely reconvenes for emergency session. What happens? Constitutional crisis over presidential arrest and succession implications. Track three, congressional oversight. Status is House and Senate leadership called emergency meetings, and both parties demanding briefing on federal marshals activity. Key date is Monday, 9 a.m. for bipartisan leadership briefing. What happens? Congress will demand details on enforcement timeline and conditions. How they connect? Track one, federal marshals outcome, affects track two, constitutional, because actual presidential arrest would trigger emergency protocols. Track two outcome affects track three, Congress, because Congress must address presidential succession and emergency powers if arrest occurs. They're not separate, they're synchronized. If track one moves first and Trump is apprehended by Sunday midnight, tracks two and three activate immediately with constitutional and congressional crisis protocols. If track two moves first with constitutional court intervention, track one is paused pending higher court ruling. Who matters at this point? Donald Trump. Position is sitting president with active arrest warrant, refusing compliance. Strategy is filing emergency appeals, buying time, building narrative that this is political persecution. Power is presidential authority, but Supreme Court has explicitly limited that authority on this question. Chief Justice John Roberts. Position is Supreme Court leader with enforcement authority over the arrest warrant. Strategy is moving decisively and definitively to enforce court's own orders with personal investment, having written opinion himself. Power can enforce warrant through federal marshals service and can modify compliance timeline. Federal Marshals Service Director. Position is holding active warrant and managing enforcement protocol. Strategy is remaining professional and executing lawful warrant, with director publicly stating, "We follow the law today." Power can execute warrant and timeline is in their hands. Who dropped out? Trump's allies in Congress are privately distancing and have no public defense today, despite being opportunity. Mainstream Republicans are silent, with no formal statement defending Trump. The power dynamic shifted from Trump controlling narrative on day one, to Supreme Court controlling process on day two, to federal marshals controlling enforcement on day three. This is unprecedented. Stay focused, clarity ahead. Why 3 days matters. No sitting president has ever faced actual arrest warrant enforcement. This breaks 250 years of assumption that presidency has implicit immunity from law enforcement. The precedent. Before this week, presidential defiance of courts meant political problem, not law enforcement problem. After this week, presidential defiance of courts means federal warrant enforcement with arrest authority. Concrete example. If you're a federal judge with power to order discovery and subject refuses, before you could find contempt, but enforcement would be political question, not law enforcement. After, you can issue warrant, and federal marshals will execute it regardless of subject's position. 3 days created law enforcement mechanism for presidential noncompliance. This is historical shift. Chief Justice Roberts just established that no one, including presidents, is above court orders. If Trump is actually arrested this weekend, that precedent lasts centuries. If he complies, precedent still holds. Courts can enforce against anyone. 3 days determined whether rule of law applies equally or presidents get special immunity. 3 moments that mattered most. Moment 1. Chief Justice Roberts wrote opinion personally on Wednesday, 10:15 a.m. What happened? Roberts didn't delegate to another justice, but wrote the majority opinion himself. Why it was critical. This signals personal investment from highest judge in land, not bureaucratic process, but personal declaration. If this hadn't happened, different justice writing could have given appearance of divided court. Moment 2. Same-day rejection of stay with warning on Thursday, 4:47 p.m. What happened? Supreme Court rejected stay same day with added sentence warning about compliance. Why it was critical. This eliminated Trump's last hope of delay through emergency motions, and warning gave 24 hours before enforcement. If this hadn't happened, Trump might have filed continuous emergency motions, creating illusion of ongoing process. Moment 3. Federal Marshals activated with specific timeline on Friday, 2:47 p.m. What happened? Federal Marshal Service received warrant directly from Chief Justice with enforcement activated. Why it was critical. This converted abstract constitutional question into concrete federal police action with specific deadline, and no more delay is possible. If this hadn't happened, could remain as constitutional debate indefinitely. Those 3 moments determined we're headed to actual federal enforcement by Sunday midnight. The next 72 hours determine whether this stays theoretical or becomes reality. What happens over the next week? Tomorrow, Saturday, Trump's legal team is expected to file another emergency motion to Supreme Court. Likely outcome is Supreme Court declines to hear it and warrant remains active. Alternative, Supreme Court modifies compliance deadline if there's indication Trump is cooperating. Sunday, compliance deadline is midnight. Financial records must be produced or warrant enforcement is authorized. Likely outcome, records are produced at last minute, warrant suspended, Trump avoids arrest, but precedent is established. Alternative, records not produced, and Monday begins with active apprehension authorization. Monday to Tuesday, if Trump complied, Supreme Court lifts warrant and criminal contempt is resolved to compliance stage. If Trump refused, federal marshals are authorized to execute warrant and constitutional crisis protocols activate. These connect because Monday, congressional briefing will address either compliance status or enforcement status. Wednesday, May 28th, major decision point with congressional response to whatever happened over weekend. 3 possible outcomes. First, Trump complied, so Congress discusses contempt case resolution and documentation of precedent. Second, Trump arrested, so Congress debates presidential succession and emergency protocols. Third, Trump hiding, so Congress discusses constitutional crisis and enforcement continuation. By next Friday, May 29th, we'll know whether sitting presidents can actually face arrest for defying courts. We'll know whether Supreme Court precedent held or broke under pressure. We'll know whether military and intelligence establishment accepted compliance or questioned it. The pattern suggests Trump will comply Sunday rather than face arrest because 3 days of escalation showed Supreme Court won't blink. Subscribe. Next 72 hours, write constitutional history. Complete current state. Legal and regulatory status. Supreme Court ruling is final and enforceable with 6-3 decision. Arrest warrant is active with Federal Marshal Service. Compliance deadline is midnight Sunday, May 24th, 2026, which is 72 hours from now. Key players' positions. Trump is under arrest warrant in presidential residence, filing emergency appeals, refusing public compliance signals. Chief Justice Roberts has enforcement authority active and is monitoring situation personally. Federal Marshals Director has warrant in hand and is awaiting Sunday compliance deadline. Locked variables. Supreme Court decision stands and no reversal is possible. Arrest warrant is active and no suspension except on compliance. Federal Marshals Service confirmed warrant publicly and no denial is possible. Open variables. Whether Trump complies by Sunday midnight. Whether Congress demands special session if arrest is authorized. Whether military or intelligence community provides statement on chain of command. Timeline trajectory. Day 1. Supreme Court ruled and constitutional question was resolved. Day 2. Supreme Court warned and enforcement was imminent. Day 3. Federal Marshals activated and enforcement began. Pattern. Escalating toward enforcement action. Next inflection point. Sunday midnight compliance deadline. 5 things to track. First, Trump's compliance status before Sunday midnight. If records are produced, warrant is suspended, precedent is established, constitutional crisis is averted. If records are not produced, federal marshals are authorized for apprehension, and constitutional crisis is activated. Second, congressional bipartisan response Monday. Watch for whether both parties treat this as rule of law moment or political attack. This tells us whether institutions accept or reject Supreme Court enforcement. Third, military or Joint Chiefs public statement. Could change everything if military questions chain of command or refuses federal marshals coordination. Unlikely but possible is military constitutional crisis separate from presidential arrest crisis. Fourth, compliance pattern. If Trump produces records minutes before deadline, like days 1 to 3 escalation pattern, it signals calculating brinksmanship, not defiance. If pattern breaks with early production or no production, it signals either capitulation or actual confrontation. Fifth, the question. Ultimately, can federal courts arrest sitting presidents for defying orders? Sunday midnight starts answering it. I'll be covering the compliance deadline and any federal marshals action in real time. Complete constitutional breakdown after.